Hello, this is a review of some of the issues that we covered in tutorial 3. First of all, on the first TMA, one thing that I'd stress is do look at the assessment criteria. I know some people have wondered, why didn't I get as many marks as I did? The answer is to be found in those assessment criteria and the marking bands that we mark to. So have a look at exactly what the definitions for each of the bands are. And as I say, I'll answer any questions if anybody wants to email me about the interpretation of those bands. The issues that we looked at in the tutorial centred around 4 key issues. The first was parliamentary sovereignty, a key concept in the British Constitution and one that's been dominated by the writings of Dicey. Whether you agree with Dicey or not, the great value that he has is that he can give a framework around which you can discuss what parliamentary sovereignty means. So even if you take the view that Dicey's wrong, you can at least build that as a skeleton upon which you can attack his point of view, or, as I say, it's perfectly legitimate to agree with him. The framework that he puts is he says there are 3 points to parliamentary sovereignty. The first is that Parliament can pass any law that it wants. He's contrasting the British Constitution with that of the United States and, by implication, most other countries, where a constitutional court can strike down what the legislature has passed. But in the UK, legally, that's not possible. Parliament can do whatever it wants, and you can't argue in court that it's exceeding its powers. You can't argue in court that the court should strike it down because it's absurd. Clearly, statutory interpretation can come into play here, but Parliament decides. The second meaning is that no Parliament is bound by its predecessor. So there isn't any entrenchment in the English system, according to Dicey. What he means by that is that there are no special majorities, no requirement for referenda. An ordinary Act of Parliament is sufficient to change even the most central rule of our Constitution. And the third meaning of parliamentary sovereignty was the sort of flip side of the first, that no court can question what Parliament has done. Again, unlike the United States, you can't get the British Supreme Court saying that's unconstitutional, that law must be struck down. That's the framework. Obviously look at it from the point of view of our membership of the European Union, and look at it from the European Convention on Human Rights. Challenge those assumptions, come to a conclusion as to whether parliamentary sovereignty is dead, or as some people argue, that it's been temporarily disapplied whilst we continue membership of those 2 organisations. The other issue is a separation of powers, an idea that goes back to the Greek philosophers, that you can analyse what government does into 3 areas: making law, legislating, the work of the legislature; carrying it out, or executing the law, the executive; and judging, which is partly interpretation, partly application of the law to the facts, which is done by the judiciary. Montesquieu comes along and argues that if one person has all those powers in their hands, tyranny will follow. He, of course, was living at a time of absolute French monarchs. So, can you make sure that one person doesn't have a finger in each of those pies? Now, with the qualification that ours is a system of ministerial accountability, that ministers are members of and accountable before the 2 houses of Parliament, there is some separation of power, and it's worth exploring that point. The third point that we looked at was reforming the Constitution. Obviously lots of suggestions that could be made. Should we have a Bill of Rights? Should the House of Lords be reformed? do make sure that you read around these subjects. Remember, when it comes to exams or TMAs, there is no right or wrong answer. What we're looking for is a well-argued case, and best of all, anticipating any objections to the position that you finally conclude with. Then there's the Human Rights Act of 1998. Make sure that you know what's in the Act and what's in the European Convention on Human Rights. We will be looking from now on at judicial review, and it's worth at this point just getting an overview of the topic and the grounds that can be used to bring judicial review. As far as your TMAs are concerned, two key questions. The first about sovereignty of Parliament. Do look very carefully at the wording of the question. Don't just give a general essay on parliamentary sovereignty, but apply the knowledge that you've gained about parliamentary sovereignty to the question in hand. As I say, Dicey has a useful framework for this, but this question particularly looks at the way that our membership of the European Union, well, EEC as it was known then, and how the European Convention of Rights is incorporated. So you're going to have to look at the British legislation and explain what that legislation does, how it does it, and what the implications are specifically for parliamentary sovereignty. The second question requires you again to use the Human Rights Act and the relevant sections there, and looking at the European Convention on Human Rights, identifying what rights are in play in this problem question. Again, with any kind of problem question, make sure that you structure your answer to the question rather than write a general answer. Anyway, hope that's useful, and I look forward to receiving your TMA in due course.